And we don't learn from history if we don't know history, because we had a war in Iraq that lasted 17 years. We had a war in Afghanistan that lasted 20 years. And we never come to the understanding that $3.5 trillion was spent in those two wars. Who got the money? It's the same companies. The industrial war machine got the money at the expense of the common people in the United States. And what politicians here do is just wrap themselves around the flag. And that is the point of the Truthsayer report, is to provide people with information and an understanding how things are done in order to move the masses.
Thank you so much for that, there, Jeffrey. All right, now, based on your survey of the audience or the people that are listening to your podcast, what can you say about their need? What do you gather around them about their need for re-information today? Do you think they are hungry for re-information, or they're just looking for something to pass away their time? I mean, how serious are we as a people to learn?
Well, I think the majority of my listeners, based on their comments, are eager to learn and knowledge for change. And I give you two quick ones. I don't know how familiar you are with the battle in the United States right now, critical race theory. Critical race theory is the theory that people use propaganda and public policy to control the behavior and movement of certain groups in the country. There's a huge battle going on in this country about not teaching it between kindergarten and the 12th grade, which currently it is not. In my podcast, I bring up the fact that it's not taught at those levels. It's a graduate level course, but the opposition to learning about critical race theory is the masses in this country don't want American history that is negative to be taught. They don't want to learn about, they don't want their children to know about slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, Vietnam. They don't want them to know that. So the opposition to critical race theory in this country has been painted black. Anytime in this country, when you want to put a negative spin on something, you paint it black. So I've had a lot of viewers who've listened to it and grasped the concepts of what I'm saying, which is the methodology is to push us away from learning and the masses of the majority race for their children to learn, because 50 years of integration, there's a change of the mindset in the country. And this new generation simply doesn't want their children to know the horrors which their parents and grandparents took part in.
Critical race theory.
Yes.
What are we talking about by this? What does it mean? Can you break it down for me?
What critical race theory is, it is the study of the usage of public policy and propaganda to force the masses to operate kind of like cattle, moving them to a different pasture. And Black people have been pushing critical race theory as the reasoning used to keep Black people in oppression. The white parents of the now generation don't want it to be taught in their schools, because they don't want their children and their grandchildren to know how they treated Black people, because it's contrary to the Constitution of the United States of America. And the theory is designed to instruct lawyers how to fight for civil rights cases. And that's why it's called critical race theory, because in critical race theory, the subject matter is showing you propaganda, public policy, and how it directs people. And a lot of people just don't want that knowledge out there.
All right. If this knowledge, if this theory were to be preached to the people, maybe taught in schools and things like that, what is supposed to be the objective, the real objective of critical theory be taught to everybody?
The purpose would be that you would try to remove discriminatory thoughts and actions against people who are not like yourselves. And it's just not related to, say, Black people. It would be related to Asian people, Hispanic people, people who are moved into the gay community, because The point is that all U.S. citizens are equal and have freedoms, and there's no constitutional denial of their human and civil rights. That's the purpose of critical race theory, is to show that people were trying to deny minority groups their equality within the system. And people simply don't want that taught because they don't want to be taught. Let's take South Africa, for example, apartheid. They don't want to teach apartheid to school, to the majority, to the white schools in South Africa. They don't want the white South Africans to know. That's how they had a system of oppression for centuries. Or Britain, which was once the greatest empire in the world, and it dominated countries all over the world. And most of the countries that it dominated were people of color. And they had discriminatory practices to keep the people in check and to keep their power in place. And critical race theory's job is to teach what they did with the purposes of knowledge and not allowing it to happen again.
Those evil that were committed against African American, for example, the Jim Crow law, the Ku Klux Klan, the homicide, the genocide that have been committed against, say, only the African American. Do you think we can still talk about it without referring to race? Do you think we can look at it as a crime against people, not necessarily against race?
No, not in the United States, no.
All right. Can you define for me what is meant by race?
In the United States, race is defined by what is your the color of your skin and your ethnic makeup. So in the United States, obviously you had a majority population, which is either considered Caucasian or white. And then the second largest group now is Hispanic. Hispanic really just means you share the same language. Of course, Central America and South America have 30 countries, and they're all called Hispanic. So one of the struggles the Hispanic community is going through in this country is kind of what happened with Black people before the civil rights movement. No matter what your social economic position, you were discriminated based on your color of your skin. But once the civil rights movement and victories were won, Black people could separate themselves socially by social economics. That's what's happening with the Hispanic community. They're no longer identifying so much as Hispanic because now they can separate themselves by social economics. I may be from Mexico, but I am a middle class or wealthy Mexican as opposed to a working class or poor Mexican. And the same is true of Central American countries and South American countries. So to answer your question, they identify race here based mostly on the color of your skin and your ethnicity.
Fine, I like this argument. So let's take it down a little bit also because, okay, your podcast, they talk a lot about truth, and I think that is a deep thought. All right. Now, talking about race, is it possible that we are looking at a social construct here, that we're looking at people as black and white, that those are the races, or do we have these multiples of races? Because I'm not really able to understand how human beings are classified into races, for example. So I need a bit of understanding there, if you can help me. Do you think it is a social construct, or is there a scientific explanation to races? That is what I want to understand.
Okay, what it is, let's go back to slavery in the United States. Obviously, slaves were people of African descent who could be distinguished by the color of their skin and the texture of their hair. Once this slavery ended in the 1860s, there were Jim Crow laws across the South and in the North that stated if you had one drop of African blood in you, then you were a Negro. It didn't matter, so much what you looked like. But if you ever spoke, well, my great grandmother was black, or some of those, when you say a social construct, it was defined that you were black, that the scientific measure was 1 drop of black blood made you black. And as time moved on from slavery to now, it's kind of divided on how you look. And even if you're mixed race or what used to be known as mulatto, you're still considered black, and therefore you're considered less than. And politically, that's the case. Socially, that's the case. And from, again, as you mentioned, from a social construct, yeah, because you're going to be denied opportunities based on being identified as part of a minority group.